This is Paratalk, Part 2 of the electronic voice phenomena. So now, before we get into the main deal here, I want to talk about personal EVP experiences.
Right.
I'm going to tell you a brief little story. Unfortunately, I don't have the audio recording to back up this story, but hey, take it or leave it, basically.
No, I mean, if it you say it happened. It happened.
Many years ago, I was with a friend, and we had just a standard audio cassette recorder back in the day. And I was over at his house, and we were fooling around with the cassette tape. And something happened where his mother came in and called him, and we left the room. And the recorder kept recording.
Okay.
And later on, when we came back, and we were listening to the tape of us, fooling around on the tape, laughing and joking around. On the part where there was, like dead air when we left the room, there was a very clear voice, and this has always stuck with me. Like I can hear it in my head right now. The voice and the thing it was saying, and it said in a very deep voice. This is going to. I mean, even me, I'm going to say this right now, and it sounds even me saying it. It sounds like the ravings of a madman. But hey, what am I going to do?
Just say it.
It said, "This is Abu talking. I tower over you."
Okay.
And I remember we were a little freaked out by this because there was.
Did it have an accent, or
it's kind of? But I remember it being very deep. It was like, "This is Abu talking. I tower over you." But very, very deep. And it was very clear. It was understandable. There was no, it wasn't like what we were just playing where we were like, well, what was that? What did they say? I don't know. This was completely, totally, 100% clear.
Okay.
And
what did you do? I mean, or did you just think, we'll take the top 40 over that?
Eventually, I guess so. Yeah, okay. I mean, we were kids, but I remember it always stuck with me. I mean, it's like, what is it, 20, 30 years, 30 years later, and it's still, burned into my head.
Well, that's interesting because, I mean, you go back to sort of when you're a kid and how these things affect you. I actually have an EVP story. I have two, but I will keep one for you to recall, to recount slightly later. But I have one which happened to me way back when I was a sound engineer working for a music company. But I just wanted to say that when you're a child and things like that happen, you tend to be more accepting of it. I mean, I had a few things happen to me when I was a kid. We used to live in a house which was quite large. It wasn't really old. It must have been built after the war. And we had a clock. I had this metal clock on the side, and it was like an electric clock, alarm clock. And it would obviously. I was at school then. I was only in my early teens, and I was goofing around my mate one day, just in my room. It was a weekend, and the clock physically moved off the side onto the floor, like somebody had slapped it, and we just laughed it off. But when I think back, I mean, you think, well, maybe you caught the cord on your foot and pulled it on the floor, but the cord was actually tacked to the skirt board, the baseboard, whatever you want to call it, the lining board at the bottom of the wall.
Right.
It was tacked to the baseboard, so
there's no way.
You basically couldn't pull it. And we just laughed it off. We thought, it's a ghost. Ha ha ha, let's continue doing what we were doing. Now, it's interesting that when you're younger, you tend to be a little bit more, you don't. Right. It's just that happened. And
you're not really thinking. I mean, the event that I just described with the EVP, if it was an EVP, I don't know. I mean, there was nobody else in the room. The voice kind of came from nowhere. It was very clear. I remember it being very clear. Although thinking maybe it did have a little bit of static to it. I don't. But the thing that, even though this was years and years ago, when I was basically just a little kid, the words and the phrase "This is Abu talking. I tower over you has been burned into my head for, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're probably right. The tape was probably used for a top 40 or something. I mean, who knows? I have no clue. I don't know where it went or what happened to it. But in fact, maybe I still have it in this box of cassettes I have here. I don't know. But it stuck with me.
Well, the thing is, if we're talking about, we're on that kind of, that in that area at the moment. I'll recount my personal experience with EVP and how I first got on with it. And I first got on with it. I got into it because I used to collect, as some listeners will know, and I've mentioned before. I mean, when I was younger, one of the the great elements of me getting interested into the paranormal and the otherworldly was the Unexplained magazine.
Oh yeah, I remember it well.
That was. I mean, I've still got them somewhere, but and on, I think it was the first or second issue, they had a special. Section on EVP. I mean, because that was like one of the main front covers, I think. And you got, talking of flexi pop and flexi discs, you've got a flexi disc with it.
Yeah.
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 And the flexi disc, right, was excerpts of Konstantin Radovar's record you got with his book Breakthrough.
Right.
It was selections of that and plus other stuff as well from the early days. And I played this record. I had one of these music centres all in one.
Yeah.
And I played this record. I put me 2 pence on top of my stylus so it wouldn't skip because of the flexi pop stuff. And I played this, and it was fascinating. I thought, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, I kind of went from there. Now, when I was working in the music industry, I was a sound engineer and had my own studio. So I had, 50,000 pounds worth of equipment at my fingertips. So myself and a colleague of mine who was also had an interest for the otherworldly, we said, let's get together one weekend. Let's, when the studio's quiet, let's get together one weekend and let's sit down and see what we can capture. Let's give it a go. Let's give it a go seriously. And we did this for about 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 sessions. 3 or 4 hours at the once, and then we'd come back a following week and do another session.
Right.
And I think on the second or third session, we used we had a white noise generator, which is a static generator, which we used for testing the speakers and the setup of the equipment. But all it did was generate white noise.
Right. Right.
And you could control the amplitude of it, how the intensity in that. So we used this unit as the background noise, because I was aware back then that in my mid-30s, but I understood the principle of EVP having to have something going on in the background so it could generate a noise.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll use this device, and we used this device, and we had obviously part of the music industry the place that I worked at, it was audio duplication. So we had thousands of brand new cassettes that were available to us. So we popped in a C60 cassette, and just away we went. We asked the questions, we recorded, and we didn't really get any response on the first few attempts. But I think sort of halfway through the experiment we were doing, we played back, and we got 2 crystal clear responses. When we asked, the first time we asked 1 question each time. I would ask a question, my colleague would ask a question. So we thought, we'll do it that way. I asked a question, and it said, would anybody, the corny one, but would anybody like to talk to us? And there was about a space of about 10 seconds, and there was a static pop. And then there was a female voice, which sounded middle-class Victorian, said yes. And then there was my friend asked another question. What was it? Something like, who did they want to speak to? And we got another response, which was please reply. And it was like, please reply. So, we can hear you say something.
Yeah. And
there was also many other, but underneath those voices, there were we could hear many other voices kind of saying things, but not audible. It sounded like the voices were made up of many voices. That's what it sounded like. And it was very interesting. And if I've still got that cassette somewhere, I would love to find it. But, 25, 30 years ago. It's, it's,
who knows?
It's gone forever.
Yeah.
But I still keep active and I still dabble with it now and again.
Well, I mean, I tried EVP years afterwards and didn't get nothing. I remember putting a cassette in and letting it record and asking questions and then playing it back and just getting nothing. And then I was like, whatever. And that was the end of that. But it always kind of in the back of my head was like, maybe I should try this again sometime in the future. Which brings us to your recent experiment.
Yeah. Well, actually, I thought, as our topic this week was going to be on EVP, that I should shall we say, dust off, dust off the previous experience and have another go, just to see,
right?
To what would happen. Okay. That's what I thought, and
so lay the groundwork a little bit. So obviously we have a clip lined up, something that Reeves recorded very recently, just in the last few days, and let's just kind of lay the groundwork for what was going on.
Just a usual evening of just being just chilling and watching the telly and surfing the web, and I was doing some updates on my telephone, and obviously most phones these days they've got a record facility, and I thought, we're doing a topic on EVP this week, let's give it a go. So I did a few sort of quick 1 minute sessions. I didn't really ask any questions. I thought, if anybody's here, if anybody can see me, I'll put the recorder on the bed, and you can say what you want. It's going to record. Feel free. I did a few of these, and I'd listen back, nothing. And on the last one, let's have a listen and see what.
Okay, so there's a clip here that you sent me, which is about a minute long. 90% of this minute is basically nothing.
Yeah, there's pretty much nothing until it gets to near the end. You hear me sniff. I make a sniff. I'm clearing my nose because I've got a bit of a cold.
Yeah.
But it's slightly after that sniff. There's something. Right. There's something there.
Okay, so I'm going to play like the last 10, 15 seconds of the clip. Now, admittedly, the clip is a minute long, but there's just nothing until the end. So Paratalk listeners, have a listen to this. See what you make of this. Well,
interesting, eh?
Very, very interesting. So let's hone in a little bit here and see if we can dig it. So I'm assuming this part right here, is that you sniffing?
That's me sniffing, yeah.
So but there's two here. There's two distinct sounds. There's this sound. All right, is that your sniff?
Yeah, that's me.
So what's the second one? What's that one?
That's me. That's me, sort of sniffing, clearing my nose.
Oh, so both of those sounds are you?
Yep.
All right.
It's one sound really, but I suppose it appears two sounds.
Sounds like two.
It's slightly after that.
Yeah. So let's play the whole thing again.
Who's that? I didn't say anything.
All right,
I'm in a room that is totally quiet. There's nobody near me. I've got the computer on.
All right,
the television's off.
Yeah. All right.
Who's that talking? Who's that?
I'm just going to play that last part again. Just the. Okay. Now, human voice.
Clearly, you can hear it's a voice. I mean,
Clearly, a female human voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's she saying?
Well, I'm gonna be the one that front everybody. This is my interpretation. I've listened to it over and over, and the only thing I can think it says is what. It's more of like what? What? I'm here. What do you want? Okay.
Yeah, it could be what. I got the vibe that she was saying a knock.
Whatever it is, it seems to be sort of, it's kind of stuffed in there right at the end. I better say something. He's going to stop soon, sort of thing. But also, interestingly enough, that the whole recording, I say nothing, and as soon as I make some audible noise, a voice appears.
Yeah, that's true, because, yeah, you're right. I mean, when you sent me the clip, I listened to the whole thing, not knowing what to expect, and it was basically just nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, right at the end, the last 10 seconds of the clip, we get this.
And that's an interesting, that when I made a noise, I fidgeted or whatever, I sniffed my nose.
You went like this.
Suddenly some voice appears from nowhere. And honestly, there was no one in the room. It was just me, the computer, and the TV was off and the window was closed. So, and that sounded like it was sat next to me.
Yeah, very, very close, very clear. Now, obviously, what you're saying, you're in a room, you're alone. There's no other sound source, right? The computer's not playing.
Well, apart from the fan on the computer, and that's it.
Wow, that's a great one. Yeah, you definitely got something cool there.
But that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, I recorded many sessions that evening. I think that was number 11 I sent you. Of 1 minute, sort of 1 minute at a time, and nothing. Just that digital static that you get.
Yeah.
I don't really like using digital equipment. I mean, maybe we can talk a bit about that, but I think the whole digital side of things is a whole different.
Why do you think that is? What's the deal with that?
The thing with digital is that unlike all the analog days, when you used a cassette and you used a microphone and the old radio style of doing it, today lots of people buy a handheld dictaphone, which are renowned for being incredibly low sample rates and low quality, and they've got incredible compression on them.
Yeah.
And you can record stuff, and sometimes they can pick up quite audible things like car going by or whatever, and they can distort the noise, and it can sound like something completely different.
Right.
If you want to say who are the two leading researchers right now in the EVP envelope, then you've got the Constantinos, who have appeared on Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters, and they've got this they are the leading EVP researchers in EVP. Well, fair enough if that's the self-appointed badge that they've given themselves, but personally a lot of the stuff they get is very questionable. It's not questionable because I say it's fake. It's questionable because it's questionable what they're actually recording, And the problem with digital is when you record something on a digital device, unless you can record in what's known as raw mode, which is uncompressed mode, which it doesn't compress the file, which most of these devices do. I know there's some decent ones coming out now, some nicer ones, but most of these cheap. I'm on about the handheld ones, the little ones that look like a chocolate bar.
Right.
The most people will go out and buy one from their Walmart or whatever for $30 and go down the local churchyard and go, ghosts want to speak to me, and then they take it home and play the file back, and there's all these garbled sounds, and they think they've got responses when in fact all they're listening to is compression, compressed nothingness, just audio gibberish, They're not actually capturing anything. I'm not saying you can't capture things, voices on these devices. All I'm saying is it muddies the water. It becomes when you move into that field and you're dealing with devices that compress sound and compress audio, it becomes much more difficult to decipher what you're actually listening to. Well, if we look at television shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, you've got although they do show a lot of EVPs, most of the EVPs they show, they tell you what it is before they play the EVP.
Right.
So most people kind of understand what it is. But if you was to play those EVPs without any, this is what we interpret it being, you'd be like, what's that?
Yeah, that's true. And the way they do it does kind of prime you to kind of understand what's going on. But we still fall back to what we discussed earlier. Even though a lot of these EVPs, you have no clue what they're saying, it's still absolutely a human voice.
Well, I totally agree. But let's just say that on the digital side, it's marred a bit because of the compression format and the way the audio is compressed, that you might not actually be hearing a voice. You're just hearing digital garble that is basically coming back to give an interpretation of a voice. But whereas we're talking of EVP, as you say, it's still a voice. Most of the time you can make out it's a voice, and you don't need any prompting or help. That moves us on to ITC, instrumental transcommunication, which is the use of audio-visual equipment to capture messages. And not only messages but images as well.
Video too.
Video using a video feedback loop.
Yes.
Through a television.
I was wondering whether or not you were going to go there.
Yeah, because it's I left that until sort of a little bit later, because I think that the listener needs a little bit of a background in EVP before you move to ITC.
Now, yeah, absolutely. And I remember many years ago seeing a documentary, and maybe you're more familiar with this, and you can chime in here. I believe it was like a German researcher who his daughter had died. She drowned.
Correct. Yeah.
And he captured her on video.
He captured her image, yes.
Yeah, and I remember watching the documentary where he says, "Oh, yeah, look," and he played back the video, and there, clear as day, is this little girl's face in the video, and it was a feedback loop where, where the camera films like that infinity kind of deal.
It keeps an infinity loop. It basically you point a. The best equipment to use is the old style VHS. Remember the handy cams, the big thing? Yeah. Use those. You use one. What do? Is you point at the television at a slightly not dead center, sort of 45-degree off angle, and of course the camera's filming the TV. The TV displays the TV, and you get this infinite feedback loop. But what you get if it's slightly off angle is you get a washing effect where it's like a wave effect. And you'll get this loop waving across the TV, and you record this wave. Now, when you play back, you don't just sit and watch it. You break down that wave into frames. So how many frames? 20, 30, 25, 30 something frames a second. With video, you get those frames, and you break them down into images. So you've got so many images per second. And then you look through those images, and of course, whoever they are, they imprint images onto the individual frames of the recording, and also that's known as visual ITC, the instrumental transcommunication. So, and also it's not the thing is that they've actually captured not just people's faces, but they've also captured examples of people. People have seen places that they recognise that here on Earth. I recognise that. That's the Eiffel Tower. But the images are always slightly distorted or slightly skewed or blurry or not quite, But at the time, there's nothing put in front of the camera. The camera is just recording a washing electronic wave on the TV, an infinite feedback loop. So it's an interesting area. But you've got the ITC and you've got the area of the telephone. I think it was in Brazil. There's a well-known researcher, I think in Brazil or Mexico. I think it's Brazil. I'm not sure, but that she's a lady, and she's been doing a lot of telephone ITC, the EVP research.
So how does that work with the telephone? Then I'm not familiar with the phone one.
A lot of reports of people that when people pass on, they die. That maybe 4 or 5 few days after the death, or slightly after the death, or instantly, the phone rings, and they pick the phone up, and it's Uncle John,
and he's dead.
Just letting you know I'm okay and everything's fine, and I'll see you soon. And then it goes bloop, and it goes off, and then they might get a phone call a few minutes later, and they say Uncle John just died.
Yeah.
And when they go to the telephone company to trace the call, it's untraceable. No number was, there was nothing, a call was logged, but there was no trace back to no number.
I've heard stories like that. Of course, when you start delving into this thing, stories will leap out at you, and I've heard a lot of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But those stories, what came first here, the chicken or the egg? I remember seeing a Twilight Zone episode years ago. Same deal. This lady kept getting calls from her husband, and it turned out he was dead. but then they find out there's a storm, and it blew over the telephone pole, and the telephone line was resting on his grave.
Right.
So, I mean, what came first here, the TV show or the phenomena?
Well, the most famous of telephone calls is Constantine Radovid.
Your sound is going crazy again, dude.
How's that?
Same.
What's actually happening?
Yeah, I'll play it back. Hang on. Okay, I'm recording again. So go ahead and tell me that part about Constantine again. Constantine
Radovid, when we talk about telephone calls, was captured in after his death. He actually rang one of the members, the main member of World ITC, which is a website, and the chap recorded these telephone calls onto audio cassette. Now you have to remember this. Constantine Radovid then had passed away. So, I mean, that's one of the best documented cases. Some people say, well, it could be fake. Somebody, they could have made it up. But I don't know. I mean, it's certainly interesting.
He recorded the conversation on...
He recorded it on, I think he recorded it on audio cassette.
All right.
He had a cassette player set to his phone because he'd been forewarned that he would be getting a phone call from him at any time. So, it's
let's have a listen. Because
Okay.
I've got the clip right here. Let's check it out. Have a listen to this.
Morning, this is George Meek. This is Constantine Radovid.
That was that's interesting because that was George Meek, and George Meek is also involved with the Spiritcom.
Right.
You're obviously familiar with that, aren't you?
Right.
And he was involved with Spiritcom. Now, it's interesting you say that you get the vibe from it. Now, these there are other recordings of Radovid and the ITC spirit phone calls. Now, as I say, there is a lot of conjecture around them because they are exceptionally clear, and it could be anybody, putting on a voice and trying to make it more than what it is. Now, it's interesting that we can move that slightly over to George Meek and the Spiritcom device.
So let's give a little background on what Spiritcom is, and it's basically an outgrowth of the whole EVP phenomena. And if you think of like a ham radio operator or running a CB radio, it's instant communication with somebody else where you speak to them and they speak back to you. I think that was the initial the desire of the researchers. They wanted to take EVP one step further, where you could have open communication, real-time communication with this other whatever it is, whether it be consciousness, dead people, aliens, who knows. But they wanted to have real-time communication. So they put together this device, a Spiritcom device, which looks like something out of an old Frankenstein movie, to be honest with you, right? You got the all these devices all hooked up to...
Well, imagine something the size of a church organ.
Yeah.
But with lots of electronic boxes all around it and stuff. That's kind of like the size we're talking about here.
So just give us a little background on what the deal is with Spiritcom.
Well, the Spiritcom machine device, whatever you want to call it, is basically a giant tone generator. And put simply, it was electronically. It basically generates vocal tones, octaves, in the human vocal range, but it does it electronically. Now, the way that the reason it does this is because allegedly the communicator, should we say the communicator and the whoever spirit or the voice, should we say the voice on the other end, could manipulate the octave of the different generated tones
and respond
on the machine, and he would have some sort of electronic vocal speech.
Right.
Now, I think we've got an example somewhere. We've got an example that we can play.
I got a clip right here of I guess a fairly standard Spiritcom communication. Now, when I play this back, listeners, you can clearly hear, the person asking the question and the response, and it really does sound kind of robotic, but interesting nonetheless. Let me just play that, then we'll have some more commentary.
I don't understand. Oh, the preamp.
You see, he's talking about the preamp.
Yeah, they're basically that was his colleague who had passed away, and he was obviously communicating with him through the device to make adjustments to make the communication better. But there's a lot of speculation that revolves around the whole Spiritcom saga, as well as same as with the Radovi Konstantin Radovi's phone calls that were allegedly from the dead. The thing is, you see, George Meek was also a ventriloquist. Ventriloquist. I can't say the thing. He could speak with his mouth closed. Put it that way.
I got a gear.
Got a gear. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. But he also he also I don't want to go into it too much because it gets too muddy. But there is recordings, and there is a researcher out there that has got recordings of his Spiritcom communications, and you can hear himself speak, and the contact, the spirit voice, the voice speak, but you can also hear him speak again, and it sounds as if he's speaking into there's electronic vocal things that you get when you've got a voice box to be removed and you put it to your throat.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. A lot of these people, not so much these days. Well, yeah, I guess people, who have throat cancer from smoking cigarettes or cigars or whatever, and they got to have their voice box removed. They use this thing. It looks like a little electric razor or something, and they hold it to their throat, and it kind of vibrates so they can. Well, if you speak.
If you take this unit and don't put it to your throat, but if you put it in front of your mouth and mouth the words, you will get pretty much exactly the same as what the Spiritcom
sounds like. Sound, yeah.
And there is one recording that this gentleman has. He's a well-known researcher. He actually has the Spiritcom machine in a warehouse over in your end of the world. It's locked away. It's in pieces. He's got, it's his.
Yeah.
He's got it, but he's got some old recordings that came with it because he bought it lock, stock, and barrel. One of the recordings, you can clearly hear the researcher saying something, and then he said he said something else, but it sounds like he hasn't taken the little device away from his mouth, because it's like it's part of the response that he wants to get, but it's him saying it. So there's conjecture there. Obviously, there's no the man's not around anymore, so we can't question people and that. And the machine isn't all up and running, so you can't inspect it because it's now a million pieces. But there's a lot of conjecture around it. So it's if you read up on anybody that wants to learn more, just go to Google and type in Spiritcom, /fake or whatever, and there's plenty of websites out there that will give you all the information and recordings so that you can clearly hear, get your own perspective on it. But there is those sort of things do muddy the water with any sort of serious
Well, I mean,
research.
the entire paranormal field is like a magnet for the scam artist.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, especially with when you've got people that are making. I mean, you've got the Ghost Box. Remember, that's the new EVP,
right?
Now anybody unfamiliar with what a Ghost Box is, it's basically an AM to FM radio, a digital radio. What they do is they do a little hack. They change something on the board, and what it does, it stops the radio from locking onto stations. So what it does, it just constantly scans. So you've got it going over and over and over, both frequencies, AM, FM, and it just constantly scans. Now, the logic behind this is that if you ask a question for real-time response, the otherworldly voices, what they do is they can use the bits of speech in between to make words, and then you'll hear your responses in between the other bits of noise. But I don't know. I mean, I've witnessed ghost box use, and I've witnessed, how people can get easily sucked into it, and it is so. I mean, if you've watched any paranormal shows, you would have seen a ghost box in use, and I'm just so not down that road. It's just a very sort of. I mean, there are researchers out there that charge hundreds of dollars for you to sit with them and ask questions, and I'll give you a ghost box reading. You're only. Unfortunately, there's a lot of gullible people out there with a lot of money, and they're happy to part with it,
right.
And then they wonder why they get conned, or they feel, like, oh well, he was dishonest, because there's a lot of dishonest people in this field. There's a lot of cats, and there's a lot of con eyes.
Oh yeah, big time.
And, it's. I think the ghost box has been blown out of all proportion, and everybody seems to have one these days. I mean, you're familiar with what I'm talking about, aren't you? The box that scans
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Scans the radio waves, and you're meant to hear the voices in between. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you get into that area, it's interesting that someone's trying to come up with a new idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, just I don't know. It's just it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I prefer that if you're going to do something seriously, go back old school, do it the old way, because that seems to have got the best results.
Well, I mean, what we've discussed on this week's show is we've talked about. There's no question that this is a very real phenomena. Okay, I mean, you proved it yourself. We played your clip. It's real, right? It is possible to pick up human voices on audio tape or digital recordings.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
there's no question there, right? There's not like, oh well, it's a truck going past the house, or it's this or that, blah blah. No, this is absolutely human voices, no question. The ambiguity comes in is that most of the time we cannot understand what they're saying, so we're kind of putting our own mental, oh well, that sounds like this, right? And that may or may not be what they're saying. That's the whole ambiguity thing, is what are they saying? Then also on top of that, well, where's this voice coming from? Where it doesn't. Do you see? From my point of view, no question, there is a real phenomena here.
No, I feel the same as you. I mean, I mirror what you just said. I mean, I find it fascinating that you can put a recorder. I mean, anybody can do this. It doesn't matter
absolutely.
What your skill ability is. You don't need expensive equipment. Let me just be clear. You don't need to have a £1,000 tape deck to do this. You can do it with a mobile phone. I proved it. I used my mobile phone, and it's not it's just a standard smartphone, and I just record, and I guarantee. I mean, it'd be interesting. I tell you, it would be interesting if any listeners out there that have an interest in it, try it and send us the results. That would be interesting for us to hear if anybody else, can do it with their phone.
Absolutely.
But it does proves a point. But the thing is, it's like you say, where are the voices coming from? Are they coming from sort of cosmic consciousness? Are we answering the questions ourselves? Are we in some way influencing what the response is on?
I mean, ultimately, I don't know. Okay, ultimately, in reality, I have no clue. But the feeling that I have, that is that these voices that are being recorded are not from the spirit world, and they're not from our consciousness. I think there's a more mundane explanation for this. But ultimately, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. This is just a feeling that I have, but I don't know.
Well, I agree with you. I'd say about 75% there. I would agree 75% that I think that the EVP as it stands today, to start with, there isn't enough research going on and there isn't enough money pumped into it. And unfortunately, the people that are generating large amounts of money from this field are the people on television, and the last thing they want to do is invest any money. They just want to put it in their pockets. So the thing is that there's no real serious research, unlike there was way back with a audio company got involved. I can't remember the name now, but an audio company, big audio company, pressing records and doing recordings, they captured voices on EVP, and it was hope back then that they would take on the banner, but nothing really came of it. What we need today is a scientific facility dedicated to researching what these voices are and where they come from, but do it on a logical. I hate to say the word, but I like to be skeptical about everything, because with the paranormal field, you can get so easily sucked in, and if you get sucked into it, you become a little bit mental sometimes. And I'm not saying everybody is. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to offend the listeners if they're seriously into the paranormal, but some people can become a little bit jarred by it, and they can't see the wood for the trees, shall we say. It's always good to be a little bit skeptical about everything you research and what you do, because you need to have that kind of double kind of vision, so that you can say, like you just said, there's most probably there could be a mundane explanation for EVP, for ITC, for
all of it,
everything
stuff
like that. For all of it, there could be it could be, well, we don't know yet. We're speculating. Or if we do die and we go on as a pure energy, as a consciousness, maybe we're able to come back, and maybe we're still here, and we can imprint in some way our thoughts onto these devices.
What you just said reminded me of I don't know if have you ever seen that movie, the third Exorcist movie? What's it called? The Exorcist 3 or something with the George C. Scott.
It's got the subheading thing, hasn't it?
Do you remember there was a scene in that movie where he's in the spirit world, and there's all these angels with reel-to-reel tape recorders and holding microphones to their mouth saying, "We're trying to communicate with Earth. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Earth?"
Vaguely, yes. Vaguely, yes. Vaguely.
Yeah, that just popped into my head, from showing the other side, and they're all trying to communicate with us.
I mean, because if you think about it, the whole EVP, let's just concentrate. I mean, we've covered a little bit of ICC, but let's cover just shows about electronic voice phenomena. But if you think about it, it's now evolved. It's kind of evolved to the level where it's now on a level where, it's now computer messages.
Yeah.
I've read a few stories of people who have had relations passed on, or messages that have appeared on the computer.
Well, that's going to be the next thing, right? Facebook is taking over the world, right? Facebook, everybody and their uncle has got a Facebook account.
And there's a Facebook app for everything.
So you watch, probably within the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be some paranormal Facebook stuff. Hey, I got a post from Uncle Jimmy, but he died last week. Things like that are going to start happening. As new technology comes out, the paranormal kind of seeps through the new technology. So what does that mean? That means that either, the paranormal is really keeping up to date with the tech world, or there's some shenanigans going on, right? I mean,
actually, you brought that up when you said about Facebook. It's actually interesting. Do you remember I expect some listeners will. There was a TV show over here, Strange but True. It was hosted by Michael Aspel, quite a well-known presenter over here in England. It was a paranormal television show once a week. It was on for about an hour, and this was back in the 90s. There was a story on there. When computers first became, every home had to have one in the early 90s, when the internet was really taking off, and
right.
Not everybody had the internet, but every home had to have a computer for your word processing, or yada yada yada. And there was a story on there of a couple that moved they lived in a country, a small village, and they just moved into a house. And they had a computer, They had no internet connection, and I'm not sure. No, they didn't have an internet connection. And the guy he used it for writing. He was a writer, and the wife was home, or he was home one day, and the computer was on, and he went on to the kitchen and did his dinner or whatever, and he came back and there was a written message on the screen, and he thought, I didn't write that. Who wrote that? So he saved the file and showed his wife when she returned home, and she just thought, oh, it's maybe it's an old file that was on the computer or something. So he, as a laugh, he typed a reply on the screen and just saved it. And a few days later, he had a reply, another text message, a text file. And apparently, Now I've not researched this story, but
right.
I remember seeing it and being, wow, that's cool. But I remember seeing it, and the interesting thing was the communication he was having was allegedly from the guy that used to live in the house in the 1800s.
Using a computer.
He was using a computer on the other side. He must be on an IBM or something.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. But that's an interesting story. It's something. It's another one to throw in there, and think, I've not researched it, but
So as new technology comes out, it's like the spirit world kind of keeps up with the tech world for some reason.
Well, look at the iPhone apps that you've got today.
Exactly.
You've got the EVP IEVP. You've got the iPhone Spirit bloody torch thing. Is it a Spirit thing? You can. Oh,
there's all
EMF
stuff.
Detector. That's it. EMF detector.
All kinds.
You've got lots of apps that you can put on your phone.
But I think with these applications, though, there's definitely a for entertainment purposes only.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, there's the joke factor. But right. I mean, I've actually seen somebody use I mean, I've seen somebody use an iPhone EMF detector app to do serious ghost research.
Oh, God. Well,
and I was like, what are you doing? I need to slap that man real quick now.
That's not serious, dude. If you're using an iPhone to do, But be that as it may, let's start wrapping it up. This has been a great show. We've discussed. I think we've gone over the entire range of EVPs. I believe. I don't think we've left any stone unturned.
I think we've covered. I mean, honestly, we can't go. I mean, if we go into depth about everything, we'll be here for
forever.
This will be volume 1 of volume 20. But I think that the general listener has got an interest in the electromagnetic voice phenomenon. What we're trying to get, I think, the message I'm trying to get out is that if you want to research it, but read the old school books, read the books from back in the day. Look at the website. I mean, we'll put a few links to websites on the bottom of the post anyway for this show. But go to the websites and read about the people and look what they were doing and try and mirror what they were doing to get results. Don't kind of jump in the water and think, I don't get any results, so it's a load of rubbish. But give it its fair shake, but also be skeptical. Have a skeptical head on because you can easily be tricked, as we've explained earlier, that a lot of the voices that you capture are very difficult to sort of decipher.
Right. Yeah, so go ahead and I guess if there are listeners out there who want to give it a shot, by all means, give it a try. I mean, you got nothing to lose and everything to gain. If you do get some good ones, shoot us an email over at Mindset Central. So that kind of wraps it up for this week's Para Talk on EVPs. And thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back very soon.
Bye now.